All right. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I'll introduce myself, and then maybe summarize the book, and then we can just go from there?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Sure.
Cool.
My name is Colin. I study philosophy at Boston University, and I guess at Stony Brook University, and I work on existentialism and phenomenology. I'm a bit of a newcomer to Sartre, so this is will be a fun experience.
Okay, good. And you also read French, so you...
Poorly.
Okay.
I'm not reading this in French. I actually was thinking of buying a copy of it in French, but just yesterday.
Oh,
but I did not.
That's so great. I love that. That's really awesome. Sometimes I just listen. My learning French right now is just listening to French podcasts when I'm driving, and that's the extent of my study. So I'm not sure how helpful that is, but that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm Elizabeth Schilling. I have a PhD in religion that I received from Claremont Graduate University in 2014, and I teach at a state college. I teach composition, literature, creative writing, also intro to philosophy when they let me, but otherwise ethics. And I got interested in Western philosophy during the pandemic, and I'm just kind of randomly going through the canon. So that's me. Yeah, actually, Colin, you probably would be a better person to summarize the book. Do you want to summarize it?
Are we only doing the first half today?
Yeah, I mean, we can. I finished the book. I don't know how far did you get?
I have not finished.
Okay, yeah, no worries.
If I hadn't been sick for 5 days, I would have been able to. But
I'm so sorry. No, it's when life happens, it puts everything on pause. No, we can do what you suggested. Start from the beginning, chapter by chapter, and we'll just see. I'm sure we're not going to get that far anyway.
Did you watch any of the miniseries?
I didn't. I mean, I watched
I watched little clips of it.
I watched little clips of it just to see. Okay, everyone looks different than I would have thought. They would have Daniel looks like a respectable gentleman.
I agree. Not someone who would kill his cats.
Yeah, right. So I don't know, but
And I thought Ivich. Are we saying her name Ivich? I'm not quite sure if that's
There is not a way to say her name that sounds good to me. So yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, Ivich was I'd say it looked much older than I think she
Yes.
and much more respectable, much less, flighty French teenager.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much, I think it was the 1980s. So the BBC in the 1980s, I think is wants to be respectable and serious.
I agree.
This is art, right? So yeah.
Yes. I found Brunet kind of terrifying, though, honestly. I mean, I literally just watched a minute of each scene, but I found Brunet kind of terrifying in his intensity.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, I didn't see him. So
yeah, I was just curious. I want to see what each character looked like. Honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, probably. I will. I'm glad that I know that it exists. So thanks for finding it.
It was total luck. Yeah. It does. They do all 3 books too, which is kind of interesting. There's 6 episodes that do the first book, 3 episodes for the second, and 3 episodes for the third, which is kind of
odd. Wow. Okay, so, I didn't know that. Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely interested in reading, the whole trilogy. So
maybe I don't know if we'll do it next. Maybe eventually.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
Anyway. Cool. So I'll talk a little bit about the book. I mean, so the book is about Mathieu. Mm-hmm. I think maybe we'll call him Mathieu, who is a French philosophy professor, and it's kind of just about his day-to-day life. I don't know. How do you want to do this? Do you want to go through each chapter?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to start or you want me to start. I'm kind of.
So I guess I could do chapter 1.
Great.
Maybe we can alternate or whatever. So chapter 1, we meet Mathieu, who's a philosophy professor in Paris in, I think, 1938. Yeah, 1938. And he has an interaction with a homeless guy who, encourages him to go to Madrid. And then he meets with his girlfriend, who it turns out is pregnant, and he wants her to get an abortion. And that's kind of the impetus for the whole story. That's the ball that gets the whole thing rolling, I would say. Matthew's quest to find a doctor and to get money, etc., for his girlfriend to have an abortion.
Right. Yeah, that just kind of like creates the plot or the storyline for the whole book. So I actually had a question for you about that. And I think maybe in our other conversations, like offline, we might have talked about it, or you might have asked this. But what do you think the role of pregnancy and abortion play in the book? Is it just another example of a decision concerning one's freedom, or is there something more? Because, in this time in France, abortion is illegal, so it could very much be taken up as a topic of social justice, etc. But do you see it as that, or is it just kind of non-essential in the sense of what Mathieu is dealing with internally, I guess?
I think it plays a bunch of different roles. I can give you a few of them, the ones that popped into my mind, but I'm not sure I've really nailed it down, because I think you're right. It is really, it's really interesting, right? It's 1938, and abortion is a hot topic, just like in 2023. Yeah. I don't know if it has quite the same significance, though. I think part of the issue, so one issue is that having a child is, I think for Mathieu, having a child would mean being locked into a relationship with his girlfriend, Marcelle. So I think, it would, if she decided to keep the child, he would feel an obligation to either marry her or at least take care of her or whatever. And so her being pregnant, I think, forces him to choose between either committing to Marcelle committing to being with Marcelle in a relationship, or committing to remain free of that commitment. So I think that's one of the things it plays.
Right. Yeah. So that makes me think, so what then would be the reasons for Mathieu? Why is he having this sort of crisis? Is it a crisis of morality or ethics, that it's what he wants to do to kind of selfishly keep his freedom from commitment? He doesn't want to commit. He wants to be free. He wants to be just open to the possibility and stay in that state, versus what he thinks he should do. Do you think that Mathieu has struggles with, I guess, ethics, being ethical towards others, and that is always in opposition to what one wants to do selfishly?
I think that's a very interesting question, and I'm not sure the answer. But I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't get a lot of ethical struggle in Mathieu, but I'd be curious to know if you think differently. I think it's more about social expectations versus versus rejecting social expectations.
Okay.
And in that sense, being free. Do you see moral conflict in Mathieu?
On one hand, I don't, because I don't think it doesn't seem to me something that Sartre would do. With the whole thing about abortion, I just don't see the book having much social or historical significance other than the political, which, since this book is written or set in the shadows of the war, there's that. But other than the political, when we're talking about ethics towards others and how we should treat others, I don't I wouldn't expect that to be in the book. But I do think that Mathieu can be said to be in bad faith because he could have a conversation with Marcelle, right? It seems like the whole book he's avoiding having the conversation, and I don't believe that he's just kind of ignorant and doesn't is oblivious. I don't think that Mathieu is oblivious, and so I think he's doing everything he can to distract himself with finding the money, finding the doctor for this abortion. And what he's not doing is the most simple thing, just sitting down and just saying, hey, Marcelle, I just want to check in. I know that we had talked about not having kids in the past, but what are your thoughts? And it takes Daniel, the psychopath, and he doesn't have good intentions, but to bring them together and to have that conversation. So it's just like we were talking on the phone about the whole part in Being and Nothingness, where you have the woman who is trying to avoid the consciousness of what's really going on. Because if Mathieu did ask, then he would have to be responsible and make a decision. And why he isn't doing that, I'm not sure. Maybe you can speak to that, but I feel like he's in bad faith with this.
I don't know. That's really well said. That's interesting. I hadn't interpreted. So I agree. I mean, Mathieu is. I agree. He definitely is not interested in talking to other people, almost in general, I would say, about his relationships with them. But or at least not with other women. I don't know. Maybe we should move on to chapter 2.
Yeah.
And we'll keep talking about this, I guess is what I'm thinking. But keep.
Yeah, definitely. So chapter 2 is Boris and Lola. We sort of meet those characters, and it's so interesting that every chapter is from a different person's perspective. Although we don't get certain perspectives. We don't get chapters from certain people, and I think that could be a conversation as well. So Lola is, there's 2 age difference relationships that are based on age difference. So there's Mathieu, who kind of wants to but doesn't want to kind of have an affair with the student Ivich, and then Lola, who is, I think she's in her 40s, and she sings in a nightclub, and she has a relationship with Ivich's brother, actually. So so basically, this chapter I thought was really interesting because we get some great quotes from Boris about that age difference. He says that it's fantastic how old she looks. She doesn't tell her age, but she must be well over 40. He preferred that people who liked him should look old. He found it reassuring, and I thought that was such a quirky thing for a young person to say. And then the other quote I had was, she's fantastic. She's ashamed of being in love with me because she's older than I am. It seems perfectly natural to me. After all, one party must be older than the other. Above all, it was more moral. Boris wouldn't have known how to treat a girl of his own age. If both parties are young, they don't know how to behave. They muddle about, and it always seems like they're playing house. So I guess my question that I thought for you about this is, what do you think of the relationships of the age differences in the book? How do these two relationships, Boris and Lola, and then Mathieu and Ivich, differ or compare? Is there something different, morally at stake in both of the relationships? Anything we can say about gender, and what does each person in the pair get out of it? What does the young person get out of it? What does the older person get out of it? And what is problematic or liberating about these relationships? So Sorry, that's like a really long. It's kind of like that. Okay,
That's a great
sorry.
question.
It's like
I don't know.
questions.
I don't know. It is. That's a really good question. I didn't think too much about it, so I'll definitely curious what you have to say. It is really interesting that there's the two age gap relationships is a young man with an older woman, elder. Oh my God, she's in her 40s. And you commented on the phone that like Sartre is brutal in this, talking about age frequently.
Yeah. I mean, he's obsessed with it. He's like, oh, I'm getting old, and, which has, he hates because he is waiting on making his great act of freedom. But, I mean, bodies are just really viscerally discussed.
Yeah, and it's interesting also because like Sartre was like, I don't know, in his 30s when he wrote this, and yet he seemed to think of, Mathieu, who's also in his 30s, as being ancient, like half dead or whatever. Anyways. So I think it's really interesting. It's interesting that there are two age gap relationships with different genders. And let me think. The Boris Lola one. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I thought more about the Mathieu one.
Right? Yeah. I mean, that was the one that seems most problematic because
it really does.
When he in the next chapter, I think is about them, but he says that he's going to like he's taking. I guess this is in the like we could wait to talk about this, but one comment was that he's going to punish her by kissing her, and it's like with Evich, he both knows that he's making her uncomfortable, but he judges himself for it, but he doesn't keep from doing that, So he's not, that's another example of him not necessarily, I don't know if he's in bad faith with Evich, but he's not treating her well.
I agree.
So the Boris and Lola one seems less problematic, and I don't know if that is problematic in itself because there's, I think currently in, 2023, talking about consent, talking about, the conversation has been raised that while young women are often, protected, especially in relationships with older men, like that's been spoken about, like is the older man being predatory? That same sort of protection needs to be extended to younger men as well in relationships with, whether it's hetero or what, but it's sort of problematic if it's portrayed as not problematic. And I don't want to be like a moral judge to Sartre's novel, but it's just interesting that when the younger person is the female, it's more explicitly problematic than because the one between Boris and Lola, Boris doesn't seem like he's a victim at all. To me.
No. If anything, he thinks the opposite.
Right. Lola's the victim.
Yeah. He treats her like that, doesn't he? Well, let's get to the Evich one in a bit. Let's see. Let me think about this for just a moment. So also Lola hates Mathieu, which I'm not. I just want to click on that. Also. It's also interesting because Boris is like hates growing older.
Yeah, I think he even says that he's, going to make sure that he doesn't live past like 25 because that would just be like, tragic.
Yeah, he'll blow his brains out. He's got 5 years. Yeah. But I don't know. That's a really interesting question. I don't feel like I have a lot to say about the relationship, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't necessarily either. I just think that it just stood out to me that we have those relationships. So maybe we'll think more about it later. But Lola just seems to me, I used to do like theater when I was an undergrad, and I always when I read books that are so dramatic like this, I mean, Sartre's novel almost seems theatrical, and I just kind of like choose the character that I might portray. Lola seems like a Blanche Dubois from Streetcar Named Desire. Like she's aging, and she really cares about her appearance, and she wants a younger lover, and she's kind of fragile. And that makes me think of like why she maybe doesn't like Mathieu either, because maybe she knows that Mathieu like will analyze her, and maybe she's afraid that she doesn't want to be found out, in a sense. Like she wants to keep up the image that makes her feel comfortable about herself, and she's always at risk at losing it. Maybe Matthew's just like too smart, she thinks.
Yeah, that's interesting. So there's another kind of, so I think you're identifying another person in bad faith, and another maybe in kind of bad faith there also.
Yeah, that's a good point. Absolutely. She doesn't want to, because being in good faith is confronting what is in reality, and she is holding on to, I guess, her own youth. And being a singer, you know, it's important that she's beautiful and glamorous and seductive, because when her career's over, you know, I think she probably feels like her life is over. And when her ability to be sort of in love is over.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So do you want to go on to the next chapter?
Yeah, chapter 3. So in chapter 3, Mathieu goes to his friend's Sarah's house to find, see if she can find him a doctor to perform an abortion for Marcelle. And at the house, he meets Brunet, who is an old school friend and one of Mathieu's old school friends. And I'm just going to pause for a moment and say that I believe we are surrounded by Mathieu's old school friends. Brunet, Daniel, right? Oh man, who's the third one?
I mean, his brother is there, but
is
Jacques is his brother.
I thought there was.
Is there someone else?
Okay, and there's one of them is I think there's 4 because they're the Musketeers. So one of them is Gomez.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Who is Sarah's husband?
Okay, right. Yeah.
And Gomez is fighting in Spain for the Republicans, I believe. I don't know enough about the Spanish Civil War, honestly.
Yeah, that's really interesting that I mean, I guess, I don't know, is there a backstory with Marcelle, how he met her?
I don't know. That's a good question. I didn't notice one. Have you?
No, I mean, I think the book just said that they had been in a relationship for 7 years or something, but...
Yeah.
But that is interesting, like, thinking about, you know, what these relationships would represent from his childhood, if they would all represent maybe a path that he could have taken but didn't. Like, sometimes we think about our childhood relationships like that.
I like that. I think Brunet, so as I read Brunet, so Brunet is a communist and a very committed communist.
Yes.
And Gomez is obviously a committed anti-fascist also, because he's in Spain. Right. And I don't think we meet Gomez, do we? I haven't met Gomez. Have you?
I mean, yeah, Gomez is not one of the characters that really stood out to me a lot. I think, I don't even know if he's like actually in the book or if he is just referred to.
Okay. Yeah. So, and Daniel's the homosexual.
Yes.
That's Sartre.
Yes, but also Marcel's like lover. The lover used, I guess, loosely there.
Yeah. Okay, so this chapter, there's a couple interesting things I think in this chapter. One is that, so Brunet and Mathieu are old friends, but there's a fair amount of tension in their relationship currently. Mainly because Brunet is a committed communist and a committed member of the Communist Party, and Mathieu is not. And Brunet pretty clearly divides the world into committed communists and everybody else.
Yeah.
That's how I read him, at least. And so he doesn't trust Mathieu. He doesn't. It's not even really clear I don't think he respects him at all, honestly. He thinks of him as I think that's a kind of a continuing trend. He thinks of him as a fence-sitting bourgeois with vague communist sympathies, but unwilling to commit to anything. Brunet's a bit paranoid also because he sees spies, possible spies everywhere. Yeah. I don't know. Did you want to? I can keep talking, but you go.
Well, yeah, I think that the contrast is really interesting, because everything makes Mathieu reflect, and he's always vacillating and trying to detect almost. I don't know how to finish that actually, but he does seem like neurotically in his head, and he says that one of the quotes that I had was, for 34 years I've been sipping at myself and I'm getting old. I have worked, I have waited, I have had my desire. Marcelle, Paris, independence, and now it's over. I look for nothing more. And in this chapter, he reflects about his commitment to freedom in the past. He says he had.
What page are you on? Can you tell me?
63.
Okay.
He had said to himself, I will be free, or rather, he hadn't said anything at all. But that was what he wanted to say, and it was the nature of a bet. So he's a teen or however old he is, an adolescent, saying, I'm going to be free or, nothing, or bust. I shall achieve my salvation. 10 times, 100 times, he had made that same bet. The words changed to suit his intellectual attitudes, but it was one and the same. But what bet? He no longer really knew. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought actually of myself when I was in high school, and my, instead of freedom, my salvation, or the thing that I wanted the most, was authenticity. I don't know why I was so obsessed or preoccupied with it, or if I even knew what it meant to me at the time, but I just wanted to be authentic. Now, looking at my childhood family relations, I kind of understand that a little bit more. But I think it's so interesting how people can get kind of hung up. And this, the trilogy is called Roads to Freedom, and it seems like being able to figure out what freedom is and whether it's attainable or not is kind of the preoccupation of Mathieu during the whole book. So I think that, so I thought that was interesting also, that he has so much regret and despair. So I don't know. I guess I would ask you, what is freedom for Sartre? Since I know I haven't read Being and Nothingness, but you have. What is, and maybe Being and Nothingness doesn't talk about this, but is freedom an act? Is it, because it seems like it's almost something that's impossible and contradictory to being in good faith. Because if being in good faith, being a reflective consciousness, is always being open, always being mobile, never really, having blindness a blind passion towards anything, never forgetting yourself. But it seems like within the essence of what a commitment means is that you have to have faith and belief in it. So it's like Mathieu is preoccupied with doing this, with rationally deciding one act that would emphasize and manifest his freedom. But the thing is that act doesn't exist if you want to be a reflective consciousness, or does it? It just seems like he wants what he doesn't want. I don't know how else to say it.
Let me just say a couple things in response. I think one thing that's kind of interesting is like the translation of the name of the trilogy, I think, is debatable.
Oh, okay.
One thing, so I actually think a maybe better translation would be something like Freedom's Roads, or the Roads of Freedom, or something like that. So not implying that freedom is a destination. Though I think it may also be a destination, just to be clear. But also that it's the road everyone's on. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think that would definitely be more what like the mature Mathieu would say. And then maybe like the immature Mathieu is stuck within feeling it's a destination.
I think, and I guess the other thing I think is that, I mean, Being and Nothingness is all about freedom. And I think that, I guess one of the most important things to think about, or when I think about Sartre, is that, freedom is fundamental for Sartre. Consciousness freedom isn't one of the properties of consciousness or subjectivity. It just is subjectivity. Subjectivity is freedom. And so even when you're in bad faith, you're still free. The free choice is to be free, that you have freely chosen to be in bad faith. And that's what also allows you to always get out of bad faith, because you're always free to get out of it. So I don't think, so it is true that Mathieu is stuck, but I think that, if we take that as a background, then we can see that, he's constantly given choices. He's constantly making choices that stop him from being free. Let me think. They keep him in bad faith. So he's freely choosing to not confront his situation. I guess that to me is like maybe the core idea, and he's doing it again and again and again and again and again.
Right. Yes, he is, but it just doesn't seem like a satisfying way to live.
Right. Yes. Why do you say that?
Because he seems as if Mathieu seems to be a character that's perpetually in distress. He is he's almost imprisoning himself in an indulgence of thought and reflection, but his reflection isn't knowledge. It's not an epistemological tool to help him come to clarity and some sort of like relief. He's instead of just asking people what they think, he is wondering what they think, and he's always judging himself, and he feels as if he is not fulfilling something that he really wants, or it seems that way to me, because he's always saying that, well, it's almost too late, or I've wasted my life, I'm sipping away at my life. And so it doesn't seem satisfying. It almost makes a case for ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, I think that's right. But he's also but like you said, he's also miserable in his ignorance. Do you think that?
Right. Well, I mean, if there are levels of enlightenment, then the first, or the least enlightened level, I think, to Sartre and Mathieu is being, blindly committed and faithful to something and having absolute certainty and never wavering, never revisiting those decisions, never contemplating, never reevaluating. That's the ignorance that is blissful, but is completely unwanted. Mathieu doesn't want that. I think that Mathieu is unaware of the level of his ignorance, that he is at. But yes, he is not exact. I think he has some kind of bliss. He has some kind of enjoyment in the fact that he can make decisions, and he has these momentary, I think, joys where he's free. But mostly, yes, he's miserable.
But yeah, this is such a great couple pages that you zeroed in on. Can I look at bring up a few?
Yeah,
here,
I love that.
Okay, so one thing I thought that helped me think about what he meant by freedom, and maybe how, I don't know if the word extreme is quite the right word, but how extreme the concept is on page 62 when he talks about the vase.
Oh, okay.
He says, on the table there were some tattered magazines and a handsome Chinese vase, green and gray with handles like parrot claws. Uncle Jules had told him that the vase was 3,000 years old. Mathieu had gone up to the vase, his hands behind his back, and stood nervously a tiptoe looking at it. How frightening it was to be a little ball of bread crumb in this ancient fire-bound world, confronted by an impassive vase 3,000 years old. Blah, blah, blah. Oh yeah, he had turned his back to it and stood grimacing and snuffling in the mirror without managing to divert his thoughts. That he had suddenly gone back to the table. Then he had suddenly gone back to the table, picked up the vase, which was a heavy one, and dashed it on the floor. He had thought, I did it, and felt quite proud, freed from the world without ties or kin or origins, a stubborn little excrescence that had burst the terrestrial crust. Sartre's a really good writer. I think that what I thought was interesting is I do think that there's a sense of for freedom of no rules, not doing what other people expect of you, not doing what they ask of you, bucking convention. And I think you see that there's another passage in which he talks about, he describes the freedom a thief has who steals some bread or something, I don't remember, of not following the rules. So I guess I'm thinking that freedom, there's multiple meanings of freedom in Sartre.
Okay.
There's this kind of existential freedom, which is just our ultimate ability to choose, to be fully responsible, to be the absolute source of our actions and choices. And then there's freedom from social norms, maybe a kind of anarchism. It's maybe a political or freedom. And then I sometimes wonder if there's a kind of interpersonal freedom. I noticed that Mathieu really doesn't like it when people put him in a box.
Right.
I don't remember where it was, but was it Mathieu? No, it was Daniel. Daniel hates it too. Daniel, he's a regular at some bar or whatever. And the guy says something and this is much later on, but takes him, categorizes him as the person who buys this drink. And Daniel doesn't like to be categorized. And so he doesn't buy the drink. He's, that's not his drink, that kind of thing. I don't know.
No, I love that. I love the different kinds of freedoms, doing something in opposition of what other people want. And even, I think there's a little bit doing in opposition of what you want. I can't remember where it was.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
In the book, but there was something about that, to go against even what you want to do would be a freedom. And I like the way you're articulating the interpersonal freedom, which, maybe what I think stands out to me a lot, just the avoidance of commitment, because it seems so Mathieu is continually choosing, but it seems like he's always saying no, or he's most often saying no. He doesn't have the yes choices. I'm actually reading A Disgraceful Affair by Bianca Lambin. It's one of the students that Sartre and de Beauvoir had a relationship with, and after she read de Beauvoir's letters, she was really angry at how Simone de Beauvoir was talking about her. But she says she reflects on a time where Sartre accepted an invitation from Gabriel Marcelle to give a lecture on promises. And he was trying, in the taxi ride over, he was trying to figure out what to say. And one of the main ideas of his speech was a free conscience cannot make promises because it cannot sign away its own future freedom. It cannot override its freedom. It follows that one can never make a promise or commit oneself.
Wow.
And I thought it was so interesting. And I think that, I don't know, maybe some people reading this novel can relate. I mean, it is sort of a story that people tell that, the bachelor, whoever, doesn't want to get married because he wants to be free, or you don't want to have children because you want to be free, but Mathieu has made decisions. He has made commitments. He just doesn't tend to reflect on those, and I think Jacques kind of points it out and Boris kind of points it out, but he has made a decision to live in an apartment instead of a hotel, to be in an affair with Marcelle, to be a teacher and to continue his profession. He just doesn't reflect on those beyond, judging himself for bourgeois choices.
Yeah, one of the passages that I was very confused by the first time I read it was the very beginning of the book, where he meets the homeless guy.
Oh yeah.
And the homeless guy, I think I've kind of decided there's like two components to that meeting. The first component is the postcard to from Madrid,
Yeah.
whatever. And the second one is him wanting to get a drink with Mathieu or whatever it is. And I think the Madrid postcard, like, it symbolizes going and fighting fascists, right? So committing to being an anti-fascist. And the drink is just going out for a drink with a friend, with someone. And in both cases, Mathieu demurs.
Right.
In both cases, he instead sticks to his habits, sticks to what he does every day, 4 days a week, and goes to see his girlfriend. But his reaction, I mean, I think Ivich, I mean, that's a bit later. But he's not committed to Marcelle either. He does things out of habit. He does things maybe because they're the easy things to do. I'm not sure, because he's done that before. I think Jacques accused him of that, but so does Ivich at varying points. Maybe we should move on to the Ivich chapter. But I guess I'm kind of wondering if the bad faith, Matthew's in bad faith partially because there's like, on the one hand, I guess I'm agreeing with Jacques to some extent. He lives a very middle class bourgeois French existence, but he's not committed to being a bourgeois. He has communist sympathies. He's got anti-fascist sympathies. He's kind of trying to play both sides.
Yes. Yeah. I think one of my thoughts was exactly that. It's like he wants his cake and to eat it too, as the saying goes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. That's absolutely right. And like,
but I have sympathy for Mathieu. Oh, go ahead.
Me too. No, you're good. I agree. Me too.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I have sympathy for Mathieu, though, because once you are of, sort of a mind where you're aware and, you realize that the level of uncertainty for most of our truths in the world that are, kind of existential and really important, that level of uncertainty is pretty high. It's very nice to be in a place where you can believe something or have faith in something or commit to something, but it's very difficult to maintain your rationality and awareness in that. It's almost like you have to have a double consciousness. You have to be an agnostic almost to anything you commit to, whether that's a relationship or a religion or your profession, that you're doing the right thing or whatever it is. You have to have a double consciousness, and that's just not a very comfortable place to live.
Wait, why do you have to have a double consciousness?
You have a double consciousness because you can't, as a sort of knowing person, you can't throw yourself completely with blind faith into something because your sort of scientific mind or your knowing mind can always rationalize or question or deconstruct. It's the perpetual, never landing the ungrounded ground of the postmodern writer who is just constantly deconstructing everything, Derrida or someone, or Butler.
Do you think, I think one thing that, I don't want to answer that, I'm not sure we should try to answer this question today, but a question I have, I realized yesterday that, I've been really, I've been reading this novel as being very critical of Mathieu waffling and unable to commit. And I think that's more or less correct. Yeah. But, though it's also, I think, meant to be descriptive. Matthew's not a bad person. He's a normal person. Very normal. That's, in fact, one of the points. He just lives a normal bourgeois teacher life. He's a professor, But, and the book also seems to praise, I think, Brunet and Gomez for their commitments. Well, I guess what I wonder is Sartre's solution to bad faith, is it just kind of a mindless commitment? Is it a don't think, do? Is that the authentic life for Sartre? I guess, yeah, that's what's been weighing on my mind.
Well,
and I think that my reason why I'm be puzzled by that is Sartre is a philosopher, and he clearly puts a lot of value in reflection. Yeah, and you made me think of that with your discussion of Mathieu's reflectiveness.
Well, yes. Okay, so I think maybe there's two ways or two paths your reflections can take. I think I think Sartre does want us to be aware, and he wants us to reflect. That's the mind that's in good faith. But reflections, just like imagination, our conscious musings, can go down the path of, solipsistic wallowing in a fantastical self and life, or to be in this sort of passive, unengaged inertia, or it can take the path of being an engaged consciousness, which I don't think Sartre really outlines in this book, so I'm not sure I'm able to say what that is, but I have this idea that there is an engaged reflectiveness that Mathieu is just kind of missing.
Maybe that's book 2.
Yeah, maybe. Hopefully. Let's hope it's in the next book.
Shall we talk about Mathieu and Iwicz?
Yeah, definitely. I think let's do that. Okay, so
so this is weird.
And so maybe we'll talk about this chapter, and then we have a listener, Dave. And did you want to chime in as well?
Sorry, yeah.
I'm gonna invite to speak. Because Dave is from Ireland, and so it's on a different time. Okay, so well, maybe he stepped away. Okay, so I've invited him to speak now. All right, so yeah, but let's definitely do this chapter because it's so interesting. Okay, so Mathieu is at a cafe waiting for Ivich to meet him. Ivich is in this kind of, I don't know, difficult time because she's just taken her exams, and it you know, she passes, then she gets to stay in Paris, I guess, and then if she doesn't, she has to go back to her hometown, which she dreads and she doesn't want to, and will just be the end of her life. So they are going, Matthew's going to go on this, he's planned this excursion to a museum where he can show Ivich like different paintings and be like a professor lover, and that's basically what it is. And so I guess my one question, like I do have some quotes, but I'll just go ahead and like say what my question is first. It is, what does, I mean, it's really just simple. What does Ivich represent to Mathieu, to Sartre? Ivich is one of the ones who we never get a chapter from. We don't get her perspective. Okay. So I'm just wondering what kind of state of consciousness Ivich represents. Because one of the first things he says about her is, this is before Ivich shows up, on 65. She forgot everything. She fled herself. She forgot herself from one minute to the next. She forgot to eat. She forgot to sleep. One day she would forget to breathe, and that would be the end. And I feel like Mathieu has kind of has a battle within him, because he is... he says at one point when I can't remember what she said or what she did, but something happened and it changed the way, I mean, Mathieu, I think his feelings are always fluctuating. And so he says that he felt both remorseful and relieved because he was less attracted to her. Or he'll say something like, like he realizes he didn't desire her, but he knows he's going to. And so I don't know, like, I just would love for you to comment and help me figure out, like, what does Mathieu, I mean, I think Mathieu even asks, or he says on page 66, I don't know what I want from her. So what is the role? And he also like calls her a catastrophe. So yeah, so what does Mathieu want, and what does Ivich like represent for us and for Mathieu?
Can I make a brief suggestion that we talk about the two Ivich? I mean, there are two chapters of
okay.
Read. And there's this one where they're at the coffee shop, and then there's the next one, not this one, but the one after, where they're at the Gauguin, chapter 6.
Right, and they have the knife, and like she pierces herself, and then so Mathieu does the same. Yeah.
Yes. I think... Yeah, I was just thinking about this yesterday, because like I find Ivich a really annoying character.
Oh, okay.
do you not?
I mean, she's like what, 17, 18? I mean, she can't be anything other than that.
I think so, but like, well, no, okay. So why did I think? Okay, so I find her an annoying character, and I think I told you this, that she's based on people say she's based on this complicated threesome relationship he and Beauvoir had with a teenager. Yeah. And Beauvoir also wrote a fictionalized version of the same girl in her book She Came to Stay, who I also found annoying. But I think it's an interesting question. Like, why? What? Ivich is interesting because she seems to be both an idiot and also very perceptive. She also is, so I think of Ivich's like primary characteristic as being spontaneity. Maybe mixed with narcissism, but I think of those two things maybe, focusing on the spontaneity thing for a moment. Like, he says in multiple places that, Ivich, Ivich is flighty. She changes her mind constantly. That's right. she's on the bottom of 70. She says, "No, I don't really, but it is a fact that I just can't picture my future. It's a blank." She said no more, and Mathieu eyed her in silence. It was true that she had no future. Ivich at 30, Ivich at 40 didn't make any sense. There was nothing ahead of her. I'm not sure that's exactly what I wanted to get at.
Yeah, I mean, that quote is really interesting because for Sartre, our freedom is in our future, right? And Ivich doesn't have any future.
Yeah, right. So, okay, so sort of to put put a question the other way, I think of Ivich as being very spontaneous. She, maybe we might call her flighty. She wants to do this. She changes her mind. She does that. She wants to do this. Is she going to go home? Is she going to go see Boris? Is she going to go to the coffee shop? Does she want to see the exhibit? Does she not want to see the exhibit? It's really hard to pin her down. And she changes her mind really, really fast. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean, but I don't know if we can judge her for that. That's not a personality flaw. That's being 17. That's having possibilities. And also, we don't see Ivich. We don't know her at all. We only see her when she's in situations where this older professor is trying to seduce her. So she's going to maybe love that a little bit and be incredibly uncomfortable with that. So I don't think we can really give a fair assessment to Ivich because she is only in this weird, like, victimized predatory relationship. Like, those are the only scenes. And then what Sartre is so biased. Mathieu is so biased when he is. Yeah. Maybe that was a slip. When he's commenting, even on when he views Ivich with her brother Boris, I don't think Mathieu is a reliable narrator at all with Ivich.
I mean, I'm not sure. Do you want to call on
You're raising your hand. Yeah, please. Hold on. Let me see. I don't know. Can you unmute yourself?
I think I did.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Awesome. Yes.
Sweet. All right. I just wanted to quickly say I haven't read this book or much Sartre or any Sartre, in fact. But you guys make this sound like a really interesting book. I want to read it now, so I'm gonna buy it, I think. But I just also want to say Ivich sounds like me, and I'm 41, so I don't know what that says about me. But yeah, it's hard to pin down, I guess. But I just wanted to say you guys are doing great, so keep it up. And I'm learning a lot, and feel like my TBR list is about to get longer, so I'm not sure if I should thank you for that. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say, so thank you so much.
Oh, okay, thanks. Thanks so much.
I have to say, one of the things that I feel like is really hard to get across about this book is that there are so many just interesting sentences that just fly by, I find. That, have you noticed that, Elizabeth, that, like, I just feel like there's just so many little moments that I think are fascinating that are not, like, obviously what the whole book is about, but just really nice really nice little descriptions, really nice little, I don't know.
Oh,
whatever.
yeah.
I think there's a lot to
absolutely. No, I was trying to think of, like, if I thought that too, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wish I would have mentioned them, but just some of his descriptions, like the end of the day in Paris was like fell upon, humanity or the crowds as like a moonlight, like falling on. Obviously, I'm not Sartre, but
no, exactly,
that's
yeah.
Kind of thing when he's like talking about like the landscape or something.
Yeah, and there's this whole little discussion of like when they look at the paintings. And what the freedom of interpretation. But wait, let me say just one more thing about Ivich. So what I think is really interesting, though, is what does Mathieu see? Hold on, wait. So she seems really spontaneous, but I don't think she's free, or she's not authentic. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. She's like almost too spontaneous because she has, like you said, she has no future. But she also, I'm not sure she's weighed down by her habits either.
Right. Well, I mean, all of us are when we're that young. I mean, science says that our brains aren't completely formed until we're like 25, right? And so if you can only be free when you can truly reflect, when things are clear, that doesn't happen until you're in your early 20s for most of us, I think. And even biologically, it just can't. And that's not to say that like when you even think about like even younger, when we're younger, like children, they have a certain sense of freedom, but it's not the same. It's not the kind of freedom that I think Sartre is valuing.
No, I agree.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that go ahead. Oh,
yeah,
you go.
You go.
Please, go ahead.
I mean, there's this really interesting passage in which Yviche basically condemns Mathieu.
Yeah, she does drive into him a couple of times.
Yeah, and I think she really brings up his bad faith, not in so many words.
Yeah.
And the way he constantly makes excuses for not going to do things, not committing, like not writing his novel. Yeah, I'm not sure. So I guess I'm saying I do think that part of me feels like she symbolizes just like pure freedom, pure spontaneity, no projects, just like in the moment. She's not bourgeois in the sense of she's not laden by habits.
Right.
But she's like a pure id. I don't know if that's quite right, but pure, that's not right for Sartre, obviously. So she's, I don't know. That's kind of how I interpret her, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Mathieu sees her as potentially his freedom. Like,
yeah, I agree.
So there's something that's very attractive to Mathieu, but in a way that is using her, not in a way that, because he doesn't like cherish her personality or her character, but he feels very attracted to her in the way that it makes it's just very like one-sided. It's very utilitarian right there.
I agree with that. I don't like,
because on 71 he says when he saw Yviche, he felt as if though he were experiencing a catastrophe. It's kind of like this elated like annihilation of like self.
Yeah.
And it says, he said on 73, he had lived a placid sort of life. It's like, I don't know, like maybe Yviche is like his manic pixie dream girl. One that involved no risks. At present, he felt precarious, beset by a menacing world, but that sensation was reflected through Yviche. He likes the way Yviche makes him feel, but he doesn't really care about how he makes Yviche feel. And so I just feel like this relationship is problematic.
Yeah, I think it's super toxic. I mean, I think most of the relationships are toxic, but this one definitely is, because he swings between hate and love with her really quickly. I mean, a lot of people do in this book. A lot, and there's a lot of emotional swings among all the characters between hate and love, and yeah. Probably also domination and submission, which is like a key point in Being and Nothingness, but whatever.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, because thinking about the passages that you mentioned with the vase, and I think like there was also, like Mathieu as a little kid. Oh, that's going to be an issue for me. Like rubbing a fly against, I don't know, the pavement to see if it'll catch on fire or something. And then Daniel, there's like this concept of destruction and sadism tied strangely up in a way that I don't know if I completely understand in freedom. I guess it's was there a passage in Being and Nothingness? Because I've read like parts of it where it's like part of your anxiety of your freedom is that you can throw yourself off like I don't know, a cliff or something.
Yeah, but I don't think, and yeah, I mean, everything relates back to freedom, but the sadism thing comes in our relationship with others, not in our relationship to I mean, everything's a relationship for freedom, but sadism particularly comes in how, in one of the ways we try to defend, I'm gonna mess this up because I don't remember exactly how it works, but in one of the ways we try to defend ourselves from becoming an object for the other.
Oh, okay.
There's like a swinging between sadism and masochism, but I don't remember exactly how it works. All caught up in trying to not, because when we become when we become an object for the other, that's a way we have of losing our freedom, and so we defend that by taking a particular stances.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Because then that would definitely be something that Sartre would say that we should avoid. But yet, isn't that kind of nice to be in that, to be seen like that? It gives you sort of a stability of being, if someone says something to you that you feel like maybe is true or you would want it to be true, like it's a very like grounding kind of thing. I
think this might be something we should return to next time, but yes, I agree. And that's, I think, the submission part. So dominance and submission is another, so Sartre describes the fundamental relationship with others as being one of conflict. And another way of putting it is there's no synthesis. It's just constant, in Being and Nothingness, at least, it's just constant, like a seesaw between one person objectifying the other person, and then person, you objectifying the other objectifying you, you fighting against that objectifying, them fighting against the objectifying, like all in just a constant circle of interpersonal conflict.
That's so interesting that he would think that, because I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I think there's very much a way that we can encounter each other and create intimacy and not be in this hyper self-consciousness. That's really interesting. I just wonder how much his relationship with Beauvoir,
I know you wonder that.
If you didn't find like the subject encounter with Beauvoir.
How toxic was it? Right? I think that, so I know that Sartre does revisit friendship and relationships and love and after Being in Nothingness in ways that don't sound quite so toxic.
Okay.
But I guess that's not how I see friendships and love and how that, but I have always wondered why Sartre was like pushed in that direction.
Right. Maybe because he's looking at, like, when I'm talking about that, I'm definitely talking about moments, but maybe he's thinking of like the overall trajectory of a relationship, like, is going to inevitably have this push and pull.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do feel like one of the constant, I don't know if it's a theme, but like there are so many failures to communicate. Between the main characters in this book. Definitely, obviously, between Mathieu and Marcelle. Mm-hmm. But you never get the sense that the other person, like, so you have the narrator or the POV character, and then, like, I never get the sense that, say, Lola really gets Boris.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's such a good point. It's like no one else really tries to. Like, we're all blaming, or I'm blaming Mathieu for not speaking up, but his partners aren't doing it either, or no one's doing it.
Exactly, right. No one's doing it. It's always just, Yeah, I don't know. I'm not quite sure how to put it, but yeah, everyone seems to be. There's like these constant failures of communication. There's the constant limits of how much we know about the other person, or what the other person is sharing about themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's really interesting. Well, I would definitely be interested in reading some of his comments on friendship. Maybe that's where that could be like a saving grace. Well,
yeah, maybe. maybe.
Okay, well, we are at the top of the hour.
Oh yeah, right.
Maybe we should wrap this up in closing comments. Dave, do you want to give your closing comment? Do you want to say anything else, or any thoughts?
I mean, it's hard for me to comment because I haven't read the book. But one thing I will say is, it sounds like these characters and their interlaced relationships are probably drawing from some real life drama that was happening. You know, because as a writer, sometimes you do extrapolate things from your own life and then kind of, you know, embellish them or work on them. So I'm going to read this with a thought process of, this is based on stuff that really happened. And I don't know if that's going to improve my enjoyment of it, but I think it will. I think it's going to make me feel like I have an inside scoop as to something that's really happened. So I'm really glad that I've got this introduction to the characters before reading it. So that's all I wanted to say. But also, I just would like to say it was a great conversation. So good job, and thanks so much.
Oh, thanks. Well, thanks so much for being here. All right. Colin, any last final thoughts?
I think there's a lot to talk about still in the book, honestly.
Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing how little we talked about. And I think we hit a lot of the big points, though, which was really good.
What about
you?
Yeah, next time I definitely want to talk about like the theme of shame, and even like the relationship to nature, and how sort of, I don't know, antagonistic or confronting the elements can be to our human predicament. I don't know. There's a lot to talk about. So I hope we can do this again in maybe a week or two and continue on with the book, because it was really fun chatting about it.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful.
Okay, great. Okay, well, thanks everyone. This recording will be up on my YouTube channel if you missed it and you're just coming in. But thanks everyone. Catch you next time.